Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and it's the 6th of January 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So we had the first all-core devs call of the year over, I think yesterday it was, and Tim Biker has his summary thread as usual. What was covered included the Shanghai scope, EOF, maybe SSZ-ifying some EL bits, and potential new EIPs. So the TLDR of this is that the EOF EIPs that were potentially going to get included in Shanghai have been scrapped for Shanghai. So they will not be included in Shanghai. They will possibly and hopefully be included in Cancun, which is the fork after Shanghai, hopefully coming in Q3, Q4, which will also hopefully include EIP 4844. But what this means is that Shanghai is pretty much set in stone. Like, we know what EIPs we want to get in there. It's basically withdrawals. I don't think there's any other EIPs that aren't related to withdrawals. I might be wrong on that front, but definitely withdrawals, a beacon chain withdrawals in there. And we can expect it in late March, early April. Given that it's kind of locked in now, and given that it's a very, I guess, like low scoped upgrade or network upgrade, I should say, I would expect it in late March rather than April. But I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? Late March, early April, who really cares, right? We know it's coming. It's coming very soon. So we'll all be able to withdraw our stake very, very soon if we want to, or reshuffle it around, all the stuff that I've talked about in the past there. But if you want to get more details on that stuff, you can read this thread here, which is obviously going to be linked in the YouTube description below. But basically, there are a few other new AIPs that were discussed as well on the call, which are in this thread as well, which you can check out too. They're not obviously going to be included in Shanghai. They're probably going to be included in Cancun or other upgrades coming later, in Cancun or later upgrades, potentially even pushing into next year there. But yeah, this is great. I think, look, these calls obviously happen every couple of weeks. There's different calls for the consensus layer as well, and there's also different calls for things like EIP 4844. But these, as I've said before, are the best way to stay on the bleeding edge of the Ethereum core protocol ecosystem. There's always these threads from Tim Biker, there's always threads from other people and notes from other people. Any major announcements from these calls usually gets broadcast on Twitter quite quickly, and of course I always cover it on the Refuel as well. But if you want to really be at the source of everything happening on the core protocol, this is what you need to be listening to and watching and reading, basically. But I'm excited, guys. Like, I'm super excited for withdrawals for a number of different reasons. But one of the things that I haven't really talked about that much on the Refuel, but one of the reasons I'm super excited about it is that we can finally get rid of this silly FUD that kind of comes in two parts. One, that withdrawals are never going to ship, which just, okay. And then also that once withdrawals ship, there's going to be a mass exodus from staking, and lots of ETH is going to get sold and the ETH price is going to dump. I think we're obviously going to kill two FUDs with one stone, so to speak, where obviously once Shanghai goes live, withdrawals have shipped. No one can say withdrawals will never ship again. No one can say withdrawals will never ship. And then on the mass stake unlock part, I think that'll take maybe a couple of months to play out, because there definitely will be a lot of stake initially that gets withdrawn. Now, obviously, that's not all going to be withdrawn to be sold. That could be withdrawn and then people want to go stake that with another service, for example. It could be arbitrage loops being closed with the LSD tokens. There's any number of reasons that could be happening, and that exit queue will probably be quite high for a little while there. But after that, I mean, yeah, I don't think there's going to be any FUD. And especially if the price doesn't budge. I think if the price really just stays even the same as it is now, maybe even goes down a little bit, or even obviously goes up, I think that FUD will be quickly dispelled. But the one that I'm most concerned about dispelling is that withdrawals will never ship, because I'm not concerned about, I guess, like excited about, because I really want to know what people pivot to next. Because obviously we had like so much stuff over the years of people fighting Ethereum about, but the most recent ones were, the merge would never ship, and then the merge shipped, and I wondered, after the merge shipped, what would people FUD Ethereum about? Like, what would the Bitcoin maximalists go on about for Ethereum that they haven't kind of talked about before? Because they've got their usual FUD pieces, which we're all used to by now. We can just really ignore those, and it's kind of like they're just yelling into the void, so to speak. But then they start saying stuff like, withdrawals are never going to ship, and I see people that aren't Bitcoin maximalists listening to these people and believing it, and I'm like, okay, well, here are the facts, right? Like, withdrawals are going going to ship. The reason why they didn't ship was because it was decided that just to keep the merge simple, we wouldn't ship them then. And they're coming in the first hard fork after the merge, and they're coming very, very soon, which is all true and all has been true for many months now. So I'm just really wondering what they're going to pivot to. There are a few things that they can probably pivot to. Probably something about Ethereum layer 1, not scaling and sharding being changed to data sharding instead of the original vision of having 1,024 different shards. Now we have dank sharding, which is just data sharding, no execution sharding. And then we have proto dank sharding, which is the first iteration of that. I'm sure they're going to clue into that soon. They're always years late on this, but I'm sure they're going to try their best to find something new to FUD, and that's what's going to happen there. But anyway, that's just one of my own little personal reasons for looking forward to withdrawals. But as I've talked about endlessly on the Refuel, there are a million other reasons to look forward to this, and I'm personally very curious to see some analysis 2 to 3 months after the merge, to see where all that ETH went, to see where, all that ETH that was withdrawn from the Beacon chain went. Did it go to exchanges? Did it get restaked? Did people just withdraw it and hold it in their wallets? How much of the rewards were withdrawn versus kept or restaked, right? I'm sure there will be people doing analysis on that as time goes on, but I'd love to have a 3-month analysis from when Shanghai ships to see how it shakes out there. 3 months may not be enough data. Maybe we need 6 months, but I think 3 months should give us a nice picture. So that's what I'm looking forward to, especially after withdrawal ship. But yeah, you can go give this thread from Tim Biker a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so I've talked about single slot finality before, which is another upgrade coming to the Ethereum protocol, hopefully in the near future. But basically what this is taking the current 12.8 minute finality time and collapsing it down to a single slot, aka a single block, aka 12 seconds. So this is obviously the holy grail of finality on Ethereum, getting us down to 12-second finality rather than having to wait 12.8 minutes, because that's a substantial decrease in the finality time. And on top of that, I believe it gets rid of the issue of being able to do multi-block MEV because of knowing, I guess, who's a proposer in the future. But there is I think there is a second, I guess, upgrade coming for that. There is. I think there's a separate single slot finality and SSLE. But I think single slot finality definitely helps with the multi-block MEV thing there, and any potential kind of reorg attacks here that could potentially happen. I mean, these are all very much edge cases, but we always plan for edge cases in Ethereum. But the reason why I'm bringing up single slot finality is because Toggle here from the Scroll team put together a great little thread talking about single slot finality and exactly what it is, and then linking, and then how it applies to layer 2s and how it will benefit layer 2s, especially roll-ups, obviously, and then links to the the blog post that Vitalik put together titled Paths Towards Single Slot Finality, which came out about 3 months ago, that I covered on the Refuel 3 months ago. And this, if you want to know everything there is to know about single slot finality, this is the post to read. And I'll link it again for you guys in the YouTube description below, but this is the Bible when it comes to single slot finality. It has all the pros and cons, all the different ways it could be achieved, what trade-offs would be included. I just think it's a very, very good read that you should go check out. As I said, I'll link it for you guys, but also definitely read Toggle's thread. It adds a lot of context as well in the layer 2 context, which I think is very important. So yeah, we'll link both of those things in the YouTube description below for you to check out. All right, so Jagroot here from the ChainSafe team put out a tweet thread today talking about how to bring privacy to ENS. And this is something that they've been researching for a little while, and they've decided to, after a few trials, to work with the ZK rollup, or the privacy ZK rollup Aztec network, which I've covered a bunch of times on the Refuel, of course. So in the spirit of transparency, as Jagroot says here, you can find the full ENS domain specification with privacy at this post here. So this is titled Using Aztec for ENS Privacy, and explains exactly how this would work. And of course, this will be linked in the YouTube description as well. But you can check out Jagroot's thread for a breakdown here. Now, the reason why this is super interesting is because ENS obviously is great, but it makes it easier for people to trace the, I guess, ownership of assets to real life identities, because everyone likes having their own ENS name and their own on-chain reputation and profile connected to it, which is all well and good, but you would love to have privacy in that world. For example, I would love to be able to use sassel.eth without having everyone know what I'm doing on that address. Obviously, if you go through that address, you'll see that I don't do a lot on there, because all of the on-chain stuff that that I do is on my private addresses, or at least I try to keep them as private as possible. It's basically impossible to have total privacy. You can accidentally dox yourself once, and myself and many other people that I know that have been around for a while have done this, but having privacy tied to, like having Sassel.eth be able to engage in things on chain while preserving my privacy would be amazing. Like that be a game changer, definitely. Not just for the fact that I could do more stuff on Sassel.eth without people being able to know what I'm doing, but it also allows me to just consolidate addresses. Like I hate having to use multiple addresses. To me, that is one of the biggest UX hurdles. Like all the other stuff that people talk about, I think is secondary to privacy and scaling, of course. Those are the two things that I've said for a long time that I think need to be solved before we can even think about mass adoption. And the reason why is because, like, even if people want to keep their privacy right now, they can to an extent by using multiple addresses, but that's such a bad user experience. Like even for me, I'm a power user, so I have a lot of addresses, but even once it gets past like maybe even 3 or something like that, it starts getting super annoying. You have to label everything. You have to remember which address interacted with which exchange, which ones interacted with each other, make sure that you haven't interacted with the same address on two of your same addresses. It becomes a headache really, really quickly. And I have oh my God, the amount of addresses I have is insane. I mean, I think last time I counted, I had at least over 50, not actively used, but I change them from time to time. But still, like the fact that I have them all there and I have to keep track of them and, they have different assets on different addresses, just super annoying. So being able to, and let alone, tying an ENS to them. So being able to obviously have just 1 or even 2 addresses with ENSs attached to them while still preserving my privacy would be incredibly beneficial, obviously not just to myself, but to the user experience in general. But anyway, I got on a little bit of a rant there, but Jagroot's thread is a really great read. The post that he linked to is a really great read as well, which you should go check out. And great to see that they're working with Aztec to do this, as Aztec really is the leader here for privacy preserving layer 2s. There are other things like Nightfall that is under the Polygon umbrella right now, but Aztec seems to be at the forefront for now. Nightfall seems to be more focused on enterprise solutions, which is totally fine. But Aztec, from what I can tell, is definitely more focused on the non-enterprise solutions. So just crypto native solutions and crypto native people and getting them onboarded into their ecosystem. So yeah, definitely go check this out. We'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so speaking of ENS, they put out a tweet thread today where they said ENS partnered with Coinbase to make cb.id usernames available on Coinbase iOS and Android mobile apps. Now, 103 million app users can now link cb.id usernames to their mobile wallets. Mobile app users can claim a free human-readable cb.id username, making identifying and interacting with wallets easier than ever. Okay, this is really cool, obviously. Like, Coinbase has a massive user base. Their Coinbase wallet is fast becoming one of my favorite wallets. It's definitely got a sleek interface. It works with a lot of different things, and they're improving it all the time. But it goes back to what I was saying about privacy here. Like, you just don't get any when you tie an ENS that can be tied to your identity to your address, right? To your Ethereum address or to your address that you use across different EVM chains. And by doing that, like, I feel like I have to kind of, I guess, like be probably more what's the word I'm looking for here? More accurate in my wording here. But I think like I like the fact that Coinbase is doing this. I like the fact that ENS is doing this. I like the fact that people are able to get their free cb.id usernames. But I don't like the fact that this is basically training users to give up their financial privacy, essentially, right? Traditionally, as a user, you could go from Coinbase to an address, and you could keep that address private from everyone except Coinbase. Obviously, if you're sending from Coinbase, you've KYC'd with them, and they know who you are, and then any employees that have access to that information can do that as well. So it's not great, but it's not terrible, right? So the terrible part is training users to basically use their cb.id, dox their entire financial usage of the chain, and then just basically afford them no privacy. So I would like to see Coinbase maybe focus more on the privacy aspect here. It might be tricky for them to do so, given that they are heavily regulated and they have to watch what they say when it comes to privacy. Because obviously the US government regulates them, but yeah, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic about stuff like this. I like it for adoption. I don't like it for the fact that it gives up, that it trains users to give up their privacy. But I mean, for years now, we've all been giving up our privacy doing stuff on chain anyway. So yeah, maybe that's what users have to do. They have to learn about that. They'll learn that, you know, by doing this, they give up their privacy, and maybe they go on to more privacy preserving solutions later. Unfortunately, no one probably most of Coinbase's users can't use something like Tornado Cash because it's sanctioned, but they can still use Aztec for now. Hopefully Aztec doesn't get sanctioned, which would be cool to see them do as well. Maybe they want to use Aztec to preserve their privacy there. But anyway, great to see this on the adoption front from Coinbase and ENS, but I thought it was worth qualifying with that extra information there. All right, so the Geometry Twitter account today put out a little tweet there where they said, in ZK, we typically consider computations ran on private data. But what if we wanted to hide the computation? What applications can we unlock? And this is sticking with the privacy theme here of basically being able to hide the computation that's being done in, I guess, like smart contract interactions, for example. So this is a quick thread here talking about this and being a bit technical about it, as well as a blog post on this in the Geometry Research Forum, which is called Functional Commitments ZK Under a Different Lens. And I mean, this is quite complex and technical. It's not very long, but definitely not going to understand it unless you are into this sort of stuff. And there's a link to a research paper as well. But I just thought it was worth highlighting since it fits into the theme of what I've been talking about for like 10 minutes now, which is the privacy aspect of things. I think privacy definitely needs to have more focus. I mean, you guys know scaling and privacy are the two things that I definitely care most about and focus a lot on and think that we need before we get mass adoption. But scaling generally gets much more attention than privacy, which is obvious. Why? Because people want to be able to do stuff on chain without having to pay an arm and a leg. But privacy, in my opinion, is just as important. But it's also obvious why people don't want to talk about privacy because of the recent OFAC sanctions. They may be a little bit cautious about it, which is totally fair. Like, I'm not knocking people for that, but that shouldn't prevent us from creating privacy preventing solutions while still being able to be still explaining to government officials and to regulatory bodies that we can still have privacy while allowing them to do, audits on these sorts of stuff, for example. And the irony of that is that Tornado Cash actually allowed this to happen. They gave you a special key or a special part of a bit of data that allowed you to show or at least see all of your interactions and prove to people all of your interactions and prove to law enforcement if you had to, even while preserving your privacy. So hopefully we get more of those conversations as time goes on. But anyway, you can go give this a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so Coffee on Twitter here today has introduced something called Rollup Economics, zkSync and Aztec Connect. This update to their Dune dashboard includes data posted to L1 by zkSync and Aztec Connect, compressed transaction data and proofs, and ETH cost of posting this data to L1 for both of these networks. Now, you can check out this dashboard for yourself on Dune, which of course will be linked in the YouTube description below. I've highlighted this before, I believe maybe a few months ago now. This is one of the really great dashboards that I like referencing from time to time. And the fact that they've added zkSync and Aztec now is really positive. And you can see they've been added here. So you can see that the cost of publishing call data to L1 for Aztec Connect went up in December a lot, actually. It basically reached its all-time high. So they spent 54 ETH in the month of December to publish this call data to Ethereum, and zkSync in December spent about 38 ETH, whereas they spent more than that in May of last year. You can see that they've spent about 166 ETH, but yeah, I mean, like, this is just a really great way to track it month by month here, as well as a bunch of other things like transaction fees, which you can see down here as well, for data published to L1. So actually, no, I'm just seeing if I'm looking at this right. Publishing call data to L1, yeah, that's the cost there, and publishing data to L1. Yeah, it's the same. I think it's the same dashboard or similar dashboards here. But anyway, you can go give this a read and check this out for yourself. The dashboard will be linked in the YouTube description below. But before I move on here, I do want to highlight one thing. This goes back to what I was talking about when it comes to, I guess, like, rollups using layer 1 economic bandwidth. They use call data and then post EIP 4844. They're going to be using their own, I guess, thing called blob type transactions, which essentially it's going to have its own fee market, and it's going to be totally separate from the rest of Ethereum layer 1. That means that Ethereum layer 1 will, there won't be, there'll be a split between I guess looking at how much bandwidth of layer 1 L2s use and how much bandwidth is just being used by native L1 interactions. Because as I said, there's a new field called blob type transactions that is only accessible to store roll-up data on it. And so normal transactions on layer 1 Ethereum are not going to be able to use that space, that block space, so to speak, or blob space as we've been calling it. So from that perspective, these dashboards will definitely need to be updated to show that and to add that nuance here, but that'll be good to see how that evolves over time as well and see what kind of usage L1 can maintain, even if the L2 gas costs aren't going to that portion or at least as part of their own little ecosystem with EIP 4844. All right, so Jonathan Meyer on Twitter today said, in 2022, I learned how to operate Ethereum solo staking validator nodes. Through that effort, I made the following process overview and tracking file to help me along the way. This is basically one of the best kind of, I guess, and most detailed guides or at least resources for solo staking that I have come across. In terms of guides themselves, I think Summer ESAT's guides are definitely the gold standard here, one of the gold standards. But Jonathan Meyer goes a step above here and shows you things like what he actually did and in what phase. So for example, his first phase was acquiring and provisioning hardware, which included buying a NUT computer, checking his internet speed, ensuring router has DNS static IP setting available. And then he makes a comment here on each of these things. So in his comments under buying a NUT computer, he says, should be a relatively modern CPU, 16 gig of RAM or more, SSD of at least 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte plus is better. And then he goes on in his other phases where he says install and operate the software, depositing the stake and configuring it, monitoring alerts with notes here. So this might be something that you might, I guess, like get value out of, because like this is all the stuff that I think people tell themselves or make comments about and all the stuff that they do, but they don't document it. Like I did all of this stuff or similar things when I was setting up my solo validators, but I didn't document any of it. And I talked about it loosely, but I think having a document, a living, breathing document, which is what he has here, which is linked on Google Sheets, you can actually go check this out for yourself, is really, really important. And I'm kudos to him for putting this together. And he also links to some ESAT's Medium at the top here as well, and CoinCashew, which is also a great guide for solo staking too, but this is great. I think this is a really good resource that people should definitely go check out for themselves. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But yeah, I mean, it really does also go to show that once you kind of know, I guess, like the basics here, it's not too complicated to get started. I mean, these things aren't really advanced user type of things. Like buying a computer, obviously, anyone can do that, right? Checking your internet speed. It's pretty easy to check your internet speed. There's a million different ways to do that online. Ensuring your router has DNS static IP setting available. You can just Google for this. I mean, this is probably more of an advanced user setting, and this isn't strictly needed for solo staking. But, you know, doing this sorts of stuff, you can learn more about computers, learn more about how they tick, learn more about networking, and it's easy to Google for it. And then in the installing and operating the software part of things, I mean, installing Ubuntu and preparing the server itself is not too difficult, especially if you follow the guides linked here. I mean, I'm a noob when it comes to this stuff, guys. Like, I am not a terminal pro. Like, I don't know how to do all the fancy stuff that people do on a terminal. I have a very basic understanding of it. I do know computers generally and hardware generally, but I'm not a networking expert or anything like that. I would say I have general knowledge of pretty much, you know, all the things got to do with computers and how they work and how they tick, but I'm by no means an expert. And I learned a lot of this stuff by doing it following these guides. As you guys know, I recently changed from a Windows solo staking PC where it was pretty MacGyvered, so to speak, right? There was just band-aids on band-aids to make things work. It was kind of put together really roughly, and I changed it to a Ubuntu box where I did everything from scratch again, just imported my validator keys, and it all worked smoothly and fine, and it's been kicking along just fine since I did it. So don't be scared by the fact that you have to use a command line or you have to follow a guide, or there may be things that don't work the first time you try them. It's something fun, in my opinion, to learn how to do it. Don't get frustrated. Just keep going. There are plenty of places to get help, like the ETH Staker Discord and the Reddit section there as well. Plenty of people who will help you in the Daily Gwei Discord channel too, so that you can go check out those resources. But I'll link this one from Jonathan Meyer in the YouTube description below. All right, finally here, we have StarkWare with the big announcement. Cairo 1.0 is finally here, so you can get your hands on the first taste of this Rust-inspired Cairo version and start writing today. And that's not all. Stay tuned for more features and StarkNet compatibility coming soon. So those of you who don't know, Cairo is the native smart contract language on top of the StarkNet ecosystem. They've been working on this for quite a while now, and this is the 1.0 release, which is basically, I guess, the first fully production release of Cairo. So developers can start writing and testing Cairo 1.0 programs. Its feature parity with the older version of Cairo will be reached in the coming weeks, and support for StarkNet contracts will be added in the upcoming StarkNet Alpha version. And you can get more details about this in the YouTube description below, which I'll link in the blog post, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But this is great to see that there is just more, I guess, like movement on the Cairo front here. As I said before, I think Solidity and the EVM definitely are the front runners. They're going to be around for a very, very long time. Their network effect is going to be extremely hard to break or to even put a dent into, but StarkWare's trying, and they're trying with Cairo, they're trying with StarkNet, and there are other ecosystems that are going to be springing up around this as well that are not going to be EVM compatible, and they're not going to use Solidity, they're going to use other languages, which is always good for everyone, both on the competition side of things, but also getting more developers involved in this ecosystem here. All right, that's all the news for today, but I did have one last thing I wanted to talk about to fill up our last few minutes here. So there's been a bit of, I guess, like chatter / news, I guess, about this extra contagion that we're seeing with DCG that I've talked about before in Genesis and all that stuff there. But I wanted to talk generally about this. I want to reiterate that there is so much FUD right now on Twitter, right? There's a lot usually, but there's so much FUD around this. No one has the full clear picture yet. If Gemini doesn't have the clear picture from Genesis themselves, and Gemini was a very close partner of Genesis and DCG, then I would say that almost no one has the clear picture except maybe Genesis and DCG. So we need to wait for more information to come out. We can't just assume that these random people on Twitter are telling the truth or that they have any special insight. Usually they don't. And a few examples of this, and I think the most obvious examples of this are for a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago now. Everyone on Twitter, for some reason, was talking about Coinbase being insolvent, right? And Coinbase not being able to meet customer withdrawals, Coinbase going down, blah, blah, blah. That lasted a few weeks, I guess, and then everyone stopped talking about it because nothing happened. Because Coinbase is not insolvent. I mean, as I've said before, they're a fully regulated, publicly traded company in the US. They're definitely not insolvent. And we can see that, right? Okay. And if they lie about their solvency, Brian Armstrong's going to prison for a long time. So yeah, there's that side of it. And then fast forward a few months after the FTX collapse and everything, and people start fighting Binance and saying that Binance isn't solvent and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look on chain. These are the addresses that Binance controls. This is how many assets are here. Yes, Binance is shady in their own right, and maybe they do dodgy things, but I don't think they're insolvent. And then you can move on to something like the Silvergate Bank, which you may have heard of. People are saying they're insolvent. Well, an article came out yesterday showing that, in fact, they're not insolvent. The reason their stock price is dumping is because their business is going to shit because all their customers are actually withdrawing their assets due to both the bear market and this contagion and just general fear. And they've actually been able to meet those withdrawals, and they have enough capital that they can sell, or enough things that they can sell off to meet the withdrawals as well, because they hold US Treasury debt and bonds and stuff like that. And it also showed that in doing so, in actually meeting these customer withdrawals, they erased all profits that they had made since 2013. So they were able to meet withdrawals, and they also sacrificed 9 years worth of profits, which is pretty much like just after they got started, I think. And that's why their stock price is dumping. Their stock price is not going down because they are insolvent. I mean, I'm sure there is some kind of value leak there from people thinking they are insolvent, but it came out that they are not. That they have the assets there. They've processed over $8 billion worth of withdrawals with no issues to their customers, and they continue to process withdrawals to this day. So taking all that on board, yes, some of the stuff that people talk about on Twitter pans out, and a lot of it seemed to have panned out last year. FTX, Terra. I mean, Terra is a different story because everyone saw Terra. Three Arrows Capital, no one really saw that, right? No one really saw FTX's insolvency either. So it's typically the things that people don't necessarily see until maybe a couple of weeks before it happens, and it happens within those couple of weeks rather than being drawn out and delayed. Sometimes you'll have a drawn out and delayed process like what we're seeing with DCG and Genesis, but as I've said before, I think they're trying absolutely everything in their power to avoid having to declare bankruptcy at all, because a bankruptcy process is not fun. But in saying that, like, they can try all they want. If they actually are insolvent or if they actually can't meet their obligations, they're probably going to declare bankruptcy. But I still kind of think that They may be able to get out of it. They may be able to like weasel out of it by selling off assets in other business departments, or putting up their own assets, or taking on some kind of debt that can be paid back later. Who knows, right? Or maybe they do declare bankruptcy. I don't know for sure. Obviously, I don't have any special insight here, but I just wanted to make clear that don't believe most of the things you read on the internet. I think that's a rule of thumb that applies to not only crypto, but everything on the internet. But yeah, on that note, I'm going to leave you at that for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all next week. Thanks everyone.